We're going to get started. How's everybody doing? Okay. So, in case you don't know who I am, I'm Lisa Arnold. I'm the Director of First Year Writing. If you're in English 110 or 120, I'm also the author of your textbook. I don't make any profit, I swear. And it's nice to see some of my students here, so thanks for coming. There are attendance sheets being passed around. Those of you who are kind of in the front few rows, if you can make sure that they get circulated toward the back, because I don't think the last couple rows have them. At the end, if you didn't get to sign in, we'll have all those attendance sheets collected. So I want to introduce you to our second community engagement panel. Those of you who are in first year writing English 120 this semester, you might be working on a sequence of assignments with the overall theme of community engagement. And as we progress through each assignment, hopefully you're getting more and more of a good sense of what community engagement means, what organizations are trying to make social change nationally and locally. And so I decided to supplement that. I would start inviting some folks who are community leaders in Fargo-Moorhead to tell us about their own experiences and just kind of to have a conversation. So we're gonna have a great time. It'll be about an hour, maybe a little bit less. And if you are interested in asking questions, we'll probably have a little bit of time at the end if questions come up. So our goals are, to learn from and hear from folks directly involved in the community, to see how many different kinds of experiences there are possible to be engaged in the community, to learn about how social change can happen, and obviously to leave this panel motivated to be involved in your local community, whether that means just NDSU or more broadly in Fargo-Moorhead or wherever you call home. So I want to introduce our panelists, and then I'll turn off this awful light. So I'll start with Cani Adan, who I know very well. He is the program coordinator for Afro-American Development Association in Moorhead, Minnesota, and he's also a member of the Moorhead Human Rights Commission. Cani has been a member of the Moorhead community, Fargo-Moorhead community, since 2015, and I feel like everybody knows him. He's made a really big difference, especially to the Somali community, and he has really a really powerful story about why he's here and why he decided to become involved in the community. So thank you, Cani, for being here. We also have Christina Lindseth, who is a talent developer and people facilitator at Cognizant Technologies. She has worked to develop talent in the last 16 years with PepsiCo and Cognizant. 7 years into her career, she came out in the workplace as bisexual. She has been an advocate for the LGBTQ community, volunteering for and now chairing the FM Pride Planning Committee, which is a big job. She has given lectures on the importance of diversity and management and sat on discussion panels. She also volunteers on the statewide LGBTQ+ Summit Planning Committee. She, her partner, and 2 teenage daughters reside in West Fargo. So thank you for coming, Christina. Shirley Dyskhoorn is with Lutheran Social Services, North Dakota. I think you gave me a bio, but I already prepared one, sorry. She is the Vice President of Senior and Humanitarian Services for Lutheran Social Services. And having developed a deep understanding of the needs across North Dakota, Shirley leads LSSND's humanitarian efforts. She is helping to chart a course for how we can help older adults live in the communities where they choose with dignity, respect, and the services they need to continue to thrive. Thank you, Shirley, for being here. Peter Schott, you want to raise your hand? He runs the International Potluck, and I'm going to go ahead and plug on October 17th, which is next Thursday at 5 p.m.? 6 p.m. Don't come early. Well, you can come early.
If you come early.
At the Great Plains Art Museum, it's his next international potluck. So let me tell you a little bit about, free food. So here's the story about Peter. Peter likes food. Peter also likes to travel. He has visited or lived in several countries around the world. In fact, he's lived in 3 different countries. 2 of them were islands. Sounds nice. During these travels, food has always been a gateway to understanding the people, culture, and history of an area. One day, he decided to host a one-time event in Fargo, a not-so-traditional potluck, an international potluck. The idea was to bring people together from different cultures and backgrounds. They would share food and the story that connects them to a dish. This one-time event turned into a monthly gathering around food and storytelling. Today, the International Potluck is in its 4th year and partners with many nonprofits and community groups in Fargo. So it's really an interesting idea. I've never heard of anything like it, so I really love it that you do this. So October 17th, don't forget. Shannon Worth-Jones is our North Dakota House State Representative for District 46, which is South Fargo, right?
Southeast, yeah.
Southeast Fargo. She is a North Dakota native, serving the people of District 46 as a representative in the North Dakota House, with a goal of ensuring that North Dakota remains a national economic leader and a place where families thrive. She is focused on growing a vibrant economy throughout North Dakota and guaranteeing that government runs effectively and efficiently. Shannon has been actively involved in service organizations, including the United Way, Jeremiah Program, and Churches United for the Homeless, as well as being on the board of directors for Face It Together. Thanks for being here, Shannon. So let's welcome them. Okay, so I guess I want us to start. Let me turn off this light. Relief. It's right up here. Thanks for bearing with me. Okay, we're going to start. I guess I'd like each of you to just share really briefly, maybe just 2 minutes each, to talk about your work, give a little bit more of an introduction to the work that you do, and maybe a brief story about how and why you got involved in the community, like what brought you in. And we can start with whoever volunteers.
Everyone's moving quickly.
I don't mind starting. I moved to the Fargo area after living in the Mandan community for many years, over 30 years. And I had been widowed, I moved, I got remarried, and I started work at Habitat, which is a perfect example of lifting people up and creating opportunities for people to be homeowners. So we had a very diverse applicant pool. A number of individual families that we worked with were former refugees. We had people that were down on their luck, had lived in poor housing. And what we did is engage the whole community in volunteering, raising money, and helping to build homes for people that would then have a 0% interest mortgage and pay it back. And it was a wonderful way to really get connected in the Fargo-Moorhead, but broader area, because we built homes in Castleton and Barnesville, as well as in the Fargo-Moorhead area, West Fargo. So that was an introduction to this area that was probably the most impactful, because you worked side by side with people that would be a little bit more vulnerable in many circumstances than those that would get conventional mortgages. And it opened my eyes to the richness in the community, the opportunities to work with other people of diverse faiths and make things happen. And so in my job right now, I do all of the work with humanitarian, which includes labor trafficking issues, it includes disaster response, it includes all of our work with resettlement, immigration, and work with interpreter services, so it's pretty broad, as well as the senior services. And there are community organizations that you need to work with in order to get the work done. You can't work in a silo. The work requires many hands, and organizations like the two gentlemen that are next to me, we've worked on things together. We provide some funding for one, we attend and participate and publicize for the other, but you need to do it with your partners, regardless of faith or no faith, because that doesn't really matter in the end. As a community, we need to be respectful of all.
So my bio kind of, oh, that's really loud. Explains some of it, but I'll tell you kind of the story of how that got going. So for about 6 months, I had an idea, and I didn't do anything about it because I kept telling myself, well, that's a stupid idea. Nobody's ever going to want to come to that. You shouldn't do that. And so I listened to that dumb voice inside my head for about 6 months, and I finally said, I'm just going to try this and see what happens. And so we had 25 friends of mine show up, had a great time. They said, well, when are we going to do this again? And so I said, again, I don't know, how about a couple months from now? So 2 months later, we did another one. We had 65 people show up, and I knew 10 of them. I was like, wow, there's something happening here. And I was pretty excited about that. And what I didn't realize right away at that event was that the room was full of white young people. And there's nothing wrong with white young people, but when you're trying to have an event that celebrates diversity around food and storytelling, you're not really accomplishing it when that's your audience. And I really noticed it when there was 4 people of color that were about to walk into the event, and I watched them turn the corner and look at this room, and their heads all went back like that at the same time. And I realized, oh my gosh, it's not what we're trying to do. And so I realized if we're going to make this something that we continue to do, I need to be intentional about reaching out to different groups in the community that are working with immigrants, refugees, new Americans, and diverse populations. And so I got in contact with LSS, with the New American Consortium, and other nonprofits and groups working in that area, so I could connect with people and leaders from different ethnic communities so we could work together. And so 2 months later, we did another event, same thing, 65 people showed up, I knew 10 of them. People said, well, why don't we do this every month? And at that time, I was paying for the site rental out of my own pocket, and my wife and I were buying the plates and carrying the stuff and setting up and tearing down. And I said, well, if we want to do this more often, I need help. And so people started to volunteer with it along the way. I got introduced to Andy Mouse at the Plains Art Museum, and turns out we had a shared vision for community building just in different ways, and we decided to bring those together to where we had an event there in October of that year, where now a dear friend of mine, Izat, shared the story of the Yazidi people. And I saw 100 people hear this story that they had never heard before about a genocide that had happened. It was still happening overseas. And I thought, what we have here is a really powerful platform that people can tell their story to those that may not otherwise hear it. And so from then on, it became a monthly event, and just different supporters and people started coming around me. And so that's kind of how it got started.
Well, Lisa said everything about me, but my name is Cani, and I came from Somalia. When I was in Somalia, I used to run a non-profit organization. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
So my organization name was CPHR, Center for Peace and Human Rights, typically doing human rights issues. Then I moved to America here. I came here, this country through asylum seeker, which most of my friends told me I am the reason why Donald Trump is building the wall. I'm like, nah, no, it's not me, because I came in before the wall. So when I came to this country, I have no choice, to move which state I need, but I came to this country as asylum seeker, then I was detained. I go in detention center. Then in detention center, we have to do something they call credible fear. They have to listen to your story. Then they do listen to my story, and they think my story is kind of having credible fear. I came out. When I came out, I thought I have no one in America, and I thought there will be an officer who is going with me. My cousin was here, Fargo Moorhead area. My relatives are back home. So I give them the address of my cousin. I thought they are going to follow me unless I get where I'm going. But here's the officer. He just found me my way out, and he's like, hey, good luck. I'm like, I was in New York, Buffalo at that time, and I have no idea where is Fargo Moorhead area located. Then I came outside. Then there was a gas station in front of me. I just go in, walk in the gas station, ask the guy, where is this address? And he was like freaking, what? Then I just asked him what should I take? A train or a bus? What? He's like, okay, there's $800 for the train. I'm like, I have $100 at that time. Then I just sit down there, get a cup of coffee. Then there's another gentleman from Somalia came out by the same time. I have little bit experience, and I was trying to tell him, hey, where are you going? He's like, yeah, someone is coming in New York, getting him. Like, I go with him that night, spend the night with him. They get a ticket for me to come Fargo Moorhead area. I was traveling here, Fargo Moorhead area, 3 months, and 3 days and 3 nights with a train. I have no idea where is the train going. Finally, when I reach here, typically when you came in America to go to work, you have to apply authorization work, all that stuff for you to work. Then when I came here, I cannot work. I used to stay home, sleeping, eating, sleeping, eating. Then I thought it's not a good thing to do. Then I Googled non-profit organizations around me. I found out Afro-American Development Association. I went there. I talked to the director of the organization, which was Hukun. Then he really welcomed me. I was volunteering with Afro 2 years. After that, I get my work permit. I start working more in public schools. Now I'm working more in public schools. I am one of the Moore Human Rights Commission as well. I am the program coordinator of Afro-American Development Association. What we're doing in Afro is typically helping the new Americans looking jobs, showing them the resource and interpretation sometimes. So that's what we're doing.
Morning, everybody. My name is Christina. I grew up in central North Dakota on a farm, and which quite conservative area. Although I did have an aunt who came out when I was about a freshman in high school. So my family was aware of the LGBT community. I went on, got married to a man, heteronormative marriage, and had 2 children. And then once life slowed down, then I came out. And so that changed things for me. Which is not a story that's atypical for many people in terms of then needing to find a community and support. For youth, oftentimes, if parents are not supportive, they don't have a home. For adults, it's just a matter of finding like-minded individuals that, again, for support. So there's this notion of what's called a chosen family versus your biological family. And so with that, as I was coming out, I started volunteering with FM Pride, just at the events. And the very first year I volunteered, the park event was in Moorhead at the time, over by the old Usher's building, if you're familiar with that stone building along the river, over by the Hemco Center as well. And there was a young man, probably in his 20s, standing at the perimeter of the park, and he just looked pissed off. And he was clenching his jaw, unclenching, clenching his fists, and he wouldn't move. Which was a bit alarming, being my first year at an event, and I didn't know what his intentions were. So I went and I spoke with, at that time, the coordinators of the event, and they went over and they greeted him and talked to him and just invited him into the space to walk and to see what was going on. And you could tell later he just had found his community, but he didn't know how to take that step. Every year we have parents with their children who are coming, trying to find community. We have adults coming and trying to find their community. And so that's a big piece of why I continue to work with that. On the FM Pride side of things, community matters, visibility matters. So it has an opportunity on the state level, working with the summit planning. It's just 2 years old at this point. But there are absolute needs for educators on all levels, K through 12 and collegiately, to learn more about the needs of their LGBTQ students, health service individuals, mental health service individuals, medical, all have need. And so that is the work that we continue to do from FM Pride and the summit side of things.
So, that is very loud. I'm Shannon Roers Jones, and I serve in the House of Representatives in the state legislature, and I was elected in 2016. And so I always wonder when I come to these events, which hat am I wearing? Because I also work in town as an attorney for my family's construction and development business, which is very active in the community. And then I also serve on a couple nonprofit boards, which is the bio that Lisa read was a little bit outdated. That's okay, that's all right. Face It Together doesn't have a board anymore, but I serve now on the board of F5 Project, and then also on the Research and Technology Park here at NDSU. So as far as, you know, my role in the community, it's always kind of hard to tell which one would be most relevant and interesting to you. With regard to serving in the legislature, it's something that I think a lot of people don't consider as, well, first of all, public service. A lot of people think that, you know, you're being a politician and you're doing it for yourself, those types of things, or they don't consider that it's something that you could do. And I will tell you as students that we have people in the legislature who are recently graduated from college, or I think there may have been a couple who were still students. At least people have run when they were still students. So I will tell you that if it's something that's of interest to you, don't push that out of your head as I could never do that, because people do it all the time. And the other thing I would say is then with my roles in the community, a lot of what I do in the legislature and what I do in the community are all tied together just basically by my interests. I am 5 years sober, and that's something that has drawn me to certain issues, certain nonprofits. That's part of the reason I got involved with both Face It Together, which is addiction services, and also F5 Project. But so when you're kind of looking inwardly and what kinds of things are you interested in, there's always something that is closer to your heart that, you know, is going to draw you to certain nonprofits. But I have had the opportunity to work with also the legislature on criminal justice reform issues, which fortunately I was never involved in the legal system, but I know people who have been. I know how substance abuse and mental health issues can cause people to make poor decisions that can ruin their lives. And so that's really been a focus of kind of changing how as a state, how we look at people who encounter the criminal justice system, and how do we, first of all, look at people on the front end. If you have an encounter with law enforcement, is it a result of an addiction issue? Is it a result of a mental health issue? And can we treat those issues rather than just locking you up? And then on the back end, when people are coming out of incarceration, how can we help those people reintegrate into the community? Because with some support from the community, then they have a much greater chance of being successful and not falling into that recurring cycle of being arrested and incarcerated over and over again.
Thank you all. What powerful stories. And one thing that I'm sort of noting is that all of you have sort of a personal connection to the work that you ended up doing. And I think that's really powerful. So I guess I want to ask maybe Peter and Shirley, since you're sitting next to each other, how would you say your work matters? Like, what keeps you motivated to continue? And I know you're both in really different roles, but what is it that keeps you going?
Well, in the work that I do with humanitarian services, there are either people coming as asylum seekers, as refugees, and people who are really desperate to reunite with their families that are in another country and are trying to deal with immigration barriers that are affecting them. And you can't unhear a story where someone is concerned about their status and trying to get their sister, their mother, their brother, some family member to come to join them here. And so those things are very, very powerful. The work that we do with people who have been labor trafficked, unbelievably powerful, where their immigration paperwork has been withheld from them and they may have come on a work visa, but the employer isn't honoring their commitment to pay them or work reasonable hours or that kind of thing. So those stories will stay with you. There are lots of ways that you can make an impact when you are delivering services. So it's hearing those stories. You are a part of what human beings need to have available to them, whether or not it be the shelter or the security, the food, and we do those things, and so that's what keeps me going.
I've come to realize I'm a big fan of creating spaces where people that may not think that they're like-minded or have things in common can come together and discover those things and make amazing things happen with it. And so this is just a way that I get to do that every month. And for me, what keeps me going is when I show up at an event and there's anywhere from 50 to 250 people in a room talking excitedly, mingling among different groups, and that's happened naturally without people forcing people to sit at certain tables, having fun and making connections, watching my kids and other kids run around, and that being the normal for them growing up. That thing when I get to see things like that, or you hear stories. Someone shared at a mental health conference once at the International Potluck was an example of community mental health just by creating space like that, and I never expected something like that to happen. And just having a really good group of people around me that are very talented in what they do. I mean, I sit down once a month with the CEO of the Plains Art Museum, with senior leadership from Forum Communications, and all kinds of other people in the community that are taking that time out of their busy lives to volunteer and make this idea and make this community space happen. And just for me personally, the personal relationships that I built and that my wife have built, and other friendships and things that have come from that event. People have gotten jobs. It's been a rallying point for different causes. It's been a place to educate people on issues that they may not have heard anything about before. And it's a space where people's beliefs and biases can be challenged in a safe spot to learn and grow, and plenty of that has happened too. And so you hear things like this, and people come forward and say thank you, or you hear these things from the community, and for me that's what keeps you going. And like I say at the events, as long as people keep showing up, we'll keep doing them, and so it's just encouraging to watch that happen.
Thank you so much. I know that this kind of work can be really draining, so it's really motivating to hear you talk about what motivates you. I guess I have a question for Representative Roers-Jones, or Shannon. I guess you as a representative attend a lot of community events. What do you go to, and I guess maybe what events do you lead, or if you lead any, or do you why do you go to them?
No, that's all right. I thought that would be easier than passing it back and forth, but maybe not. I would say that a lot of, I think it was because I had my hand here. I think a lot of the events that I end up going to, many of them are business related. Maybe not. So I do a lot of chamber things. I do a lot of United Way events, when I can make it, things like 1 Million Cups and a lot of the entrepreneurial things, things at Prairie Den, I enjoy those, but a lot of times with schedule, with work and that sort of stuff is a little bit challenging. But, you know, when people are trying to figure out what things that they want to do, what things that they want to get involved in, I think there's so many opportunities across the Fargo-Moorhead area. And I'm trying to think, was there a second question or just what do I do or how do I get involved?
Yeah, how do you choose what to do?
Well, I'm in a fortunate position as a legislator. I have a really big mailbox and everybody sends me their stuff. So every professional association in the state of North Dakota sends me stuff. So I get stuff from the pharmacists and the nurses and the auto dealers and the motor carriers and insurance people. And I just go to as many things as I'm able to. But I also have a family and I work. And so that's, you know, fortunate for me that I have a lot of opportunities to go to different events. But there's so many things also that I find out about through social media, Facebook. The International Potluck is something that I have wanted to go to, as I've seen it a handful of times and it never works out. But yet. But I think just kind of keeping your eyes open for the things that are out there, because there's so many opportunities within the community. Obviously, NDSU's probably got an assortment of clubs and groups that you can participate in. But I would also make sure that people are looking outside of the things that are traditionally geared towards students and look at your the Chamber of Fargo-Moorhead West Fargo has a lot of things that are for younger people to get involved. They have a young professional network, which, I mean, I think you guys are all semi-professional. You could participate in those sorts of things. They also have a Young Entrepreneur Academy for people who are starting to think about what they might want to do with their business, with their lives after college, or if you have a great idea that you want to work on developing. I don't think you have to have an idea to get started, but there's a lot of different opportunities like that in the business community. And then there's so many different nonprofits throughout the region that would love to have people get involved. There's the human capital, the people who are willing to volunteer their time is always the biggest need. You know, people especially, I think young people are more engaged. I think sometimes older people are more engaged, but that age kind of right in the middle to starting, you know, younger families is where people really struggle with their time and having the time to engage in nonprofits or community activities. And so if you are at this age right now where you have a little bit of extra time, it would certainly be appreciated if you would connect with a nonprofit that speaks to you, you know, or that fills your bucket, and just give of your time even if you don't have the financial resources.
Thank you. That's good advice. Of course, many of our students feel like they have no time because they're overloaded with courses, but you do have more time. Cani, I want to ask you, because you show up to a lot of stuff. I know this about you. You know everybody. So why do you do that? Like, why do you go to community events as somebody, you could just sort of stick with Afro and, you know, just work on only interacting with, you know, the Somali community who really need your help. But why is it that you go to other events? Why is it that you involve yourself in that way?
Good question. Yeah, like you said, most of the clients that we help is New Americans. And what we're doing is applying them jobs and showing them the resource. So when I'm going to the other events, I really like being involved for the other cultures, to know the other people. It's always another experience. Like when I was traveling, I told you I came to this country as asylum seeker. When I was traveling all the way for Latino countries, each country I came, I learned different things and many things. So, but what makes me motivated is we apply jobs for the families and they've been able to pay for their bills. And most of the families are happy and we are the reason they are happy. That makes me keep doing what I'm doing.
Yes. Christina, I have a question for you because you're working on FM Pride, and I think this is a really hard, this is a really difficult task to kind of manage it and to get enough volunteers. I sense that it's entirely volunteer run, although I'm right about that. So how do you motivate people to get involved? How do you persuade people?
It's a great question. A lot of the individuals who are involved so there's multiple levels to that in the sense of the planning committee itself, which is about 14 to 15 people. They all are very passionate, either LGBTQ identify themselves or allies, or have a family member, and that is their way of showing support. The other thing I'd say, sorry, sidebar, but when you get involved, it's often you start with something you're passionate about. We've all kind of alluded to that already. And from that perspective, the passion, this is not work. This is fun in many ways. These are things that we love, or there's a greater sense of purpose, so it's not work, which helps drive that in and of itself. And beyond that as well, getting involved, you network, you meet people, and it opens up doors to other opportunities, as well as you build skills whether you realize it or not. Just being involved communication-wise, and you're learning skills, managing things, and so forth. So there's that piece of it, so I'll get off that soapbox for a second as well. So the volunteers on the board, the people who volunteer at the events, again, they're seeking community. They want to show their support. They have a lot of fun doing it. And it is a lot of recruiting, just going out talking to businesses who want to be supportive, talking to school organizations. We've been NDSU, talked to your group as well as Concordia and MSUM, inviting and recruiting high schools as well. And then there are businesses that want to get involved, maybe not in the volunteer aspect from a sponsorship level, because they want to let people in the community know that they're supportive as well, because they also recognize that diversity is power, and it helps recruit and retain talent to be involved.
Thank you. Shannon, can you share with us a success story, either in your work as a legislator or as just somebody involved in the community more generally?
Sure. This last legislative session was my second session since being elected in 2016. And the first session I went in with really no, this is what I want to accomplish. It was really all about learning. The second session I had some things that I wanted to accomplish, especially on the criminal justice reform front. And I had a couple of good ideas and turned into a couple more ideas that turned into way too many bills. But all in all, it was a very busy and, in my opinion, successful session on kind of the criminal justice reform front. Probably my favorite bill that we were able to get passed through the legislature this last session was criminal record sealing, which was creates a process for people who have had prior convictions to get those records sealed so that they don't show up on your typical job search or housing rental application search. Now, if you have a work position that involves an enhanced background search where they need to dig a little deeper, those things are still available to law enforcement. But for someone who has had a misdemeanor and at least 3 years have passed since they've come off of parole and probation, and they haven't had new encounters with law enforcement, or a non-violent, non-sex offense felony, and at least 5 years have passed since they've come off parole and probation, they can request the courts seal those criminal records so that they don't show up when you do the searches. And then the courts go through a process where they reach out to the victims if they're available. They kind of balance the public's right to know this information with the circumstances surrounding the person who has the felony or the convictions on their record, and kind of look at how they've turned their lives around, if they've gotten involved in the community, and if the benefits to the person outweigh the cost to the community, then the court has the ability to seal that record, which allows people, really a fresh start, so they don't have to have that item, that poor choice from their past hanging over their heads for the rest of their lives. And so that to me was probably what I would consider my biggest win in the last couple of years.
Yeah, that makes a big difference to a lot of people, for sure. Thank you. I'm curious, and this can kind of be for anybody who has thoughts on this. What do you see as like the obstacles, the things that come in the way of community engagement for young people in particular, or just in general? What do you think? Peter's got an answer. Okay.
As I reflect back on my own experiences, I think that the first big obstacle is just that voice inside your head that says you can't do it because you're not good enough, or you'll never be able to fix that, or you don't have time, or whatever. That's a big obstacle for people. I think secondly, just maybe a lack of focus, where you're going to try to do 500 things at the same time, rather than just let's just pick one thing and dive into that. And then, followed by, once you want to get into something, looking at what's already happening. Do I just want to start something, or are there already people I could advocate and work alongside and just partner with them? And, I always like to create things really big right away. And so for me to start small and then grow, that can be an obstacle too, because you think, I'm never going to fix X, Y, Z.
I think another obstacle is that you're fearful of others because you don't know them, or that you've listened to people make people of different colors or different faiths or different political beliefs to be feared. And I think that you have to be willing to open yourself up to meet new people. To understand where they came from. We've participated in a number of areas like Narrative 4, where people in the community have a meaningful interaction and discussion and get to know people who are coming as immigrants. We've also promoted and supported Green Card Voices. So immigrant stories and sharing that information and getting the word out that a lot of people who have differences have so many more things in common with us that if we take the time to know and understand each other, we have a richer community, and we eliminate some of those fears and biases.
Thank you. Anybody else want to address that? Or okay. So another question I have, since we have a lot of NDSU students, if you can sort of give a pitch for why you think NDSU students should be involved in the community beyond just NDSU locally, what would you pitch? And this can be open for anybody.
Let me start this. For my understanding, I think NDSU students are important because we have English classes in our office. We do Saturday, Sunday classes 4 to 6, and there's a lot of students coming from NDSU helping us there and volunteering with us. And of course, Lisa is one of our volunteers since 2015, so I think it's very important to have them being involved for the community.
My thought on that, beyond just being a student, is that your environment is a reflection of you. And so if there is something that is lacking in your community, you have the power to change that by getting involved in that community. It doesn't matter if it's on this campus or as you move to your first job into eventually your career. What you want to see reflected in your community, in part, is onus on you to be part of that, to bring it to fruition.
So I'm going to go a little different direction. In North Dakota right now, we have 30,000 unfilled jobs, and those are only the jobs that are posted. There's more than that because there are jobs that are, people aren't taking the time to post because there's not enough employees to fill the jobs that we have right now. And my opinion is that North Dakota is a very unique community. I will say when I graduated from high school here in town, there wasn't the opportunity in the environment that we have right now. I left North Dakota for about 15 years, and I didn't have an intention of coming back to live here. But as Fargo developed, as I got older, had started a family, I recognized that Fargo is a pretty cool and unique place to live and to raise your family. We've got some great work opportunities, but the point is this: if you intend to stay in Fargo, or even if you don't, we have a very unique culture where when you go out and you start a conversation with someone you don't know, the first thing that they're going to do is start to ask you questions. Where are you from? Tell me, about the people that you know. And we look to build connections with one another. And I think that that's a fantastic thing for you guys to do. If you're here on the NDSU campus, you can build connections and lifelong friendships with the people that you know here on campus. But you're not getting the full experience if you don't go out and do that in the community of Fargo. And I think once you start to do that, this is probably a reference that's far too old for you all, but there's this concept of 7 degrees of separation from Kevin Bacon. In Fargo, there's only 2 degrees of separation. You start talking to somebody, and within 2 people, you're going to know somebody that they know. And it's really a cool thing that we have going here in Fargo. And so I encourage you to go out into the community, talk to adults, talk to people that you think you would probably disagree with. That's another thing that I try and challenge myself with, is reach out to people that you think you wouldn't have a lot in common with, because it doesn't take very long until you find things that you do have in common with them, and it just helps to really expand your world vision even in Little Fargo.
Thank you. I'm a relative newcomer to the Fargo-Moorhead area, and part of the reason I decided to do these community engagement panels was I realized, in the 5 years that I've been here, I've met a lot of people, and not all of you, but some of you, and I realized, I wonder if I could do this, and it's really easy just to invite people, and I got a lot of yeses, and it was just a fantastic experience, even for me as somebody organizing these things. It was really surprising, and that definitely wouldn't have been the case in other communities I've lived in that are much larger, so really appreciate that. Okay, so one more question, and this is for all of you. So if you had 3 words to describe why you think community engagement matters, or how you would describe community engagement in general, what would they be? So you only have 3 words.
Love your neighbor.
Protect your neighbor.
Serve the future.
It's going to be a cop-out, but ditto.
Yes, you matter.
Thank you. Thanks so much. So do we have any questions from our audience? This is your chance to find out what other things about community engagement that you're just dying to know.
I guess I'm just curious, from Shannon, how did you got involved, before, kind of what got you interested in legislation, and what brought you up to that?
Okay, so for anyone who didn't hear, the question was, how did I get involved, or what got me interested? I don't know what the trick is with this. And I appreciate the opportunity to answer that question, because a lot of the things that Peter said about self-doubt really resonate for me. It's one of those things that was kind of in the back of my mind. If you'd like to hear the long story, I can tell you afterwards. But I've always had just kind of an interest in politics, but it's not something I thought that I would do myself. I didn't think that I would put myself out in front of people in that way. But I had someone ask me, and I said, no, 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 no. And then someone else asked me, and I said, you're funny. And then a third person asked me. And all of these people were unrelated to one another. They didn't know each other. And so then I started to think, well, maybe I could do this. But there was a months-long process with me creating a lot of mental roadblocks for myself. I can't do it because of my family. I can't do it because of my work. I can't do it for this reason or that reason. And the more I started to research different things and think about my family schedule, my work schedule, everything started to fall away. So that's the one thing I would challenge all of you, women especially, because women tend to think that we can't do things if we don't have all of the information or we don't know everything that we need to know, where statistically men tend to feel more confident in their ability to figure things out as they go along. But across the board, people sell themselves short as far as your ability to learn things and be successful in a role. I'm not a public speaker. I get nervous every time I do it, but every time I do it, I get a little bit better. And so I don't feel like this is not something that you can do because you don't like speaking in front of people, you don't understand all of the issues. Many of the things being involved in the legislature, you won't know and you can't know until you get there. And that's the same serving in board positions, serving in local elected positions. There's a lot of figuring it out as you go along, and you just have to be willing to learn and willing to do the work.
Thank you. I saw another hand. Was there another question? All right, all the way in the back.
We're having our classes talk about community engagement and write about it and interview people they know about it. And we're trying to find anchor points within the definition of community engagement and social change. One of the quotes that one of my students wrote about, he was asking who he was interviewing their definition of community engagement, social change, to talk about it. And the quote was something like, I think you can be involved in the community and nobody knows it. And I would just like your response to that as an anchor point within that definition.
Who wants to take that one? Community engagement as something that maybe not everybody knows that you do it.
That's a hard one because I think most of the people up here know who's working on various issues, whether or not it's human rights or advocacy for people that have been affected or victims of crime or whatever it might be. They might not seek publicity for being engaged, but generally you know who the advocates are, who gets things done, who will speak up if need be in whatever form is required. Does that help?
I will just say that I feel like I'm talking too much, so other people can cut me off at any time, but there's a lot of things that you can do to volunteer that aren't public, if that's not what you're comfortable with. If you want to help a nonprofit with their bookkeeping, if you want to be involved in grant writing, if you want to run somebody's social media, there's a lot of things that you can do if you're not comfortable with the idea of being at the forefront of things. And at the same time, there's a lot of people who wouldn't mind being public, but they just don't have the time to be at all of the things. There are things that you can do from the comfort of your own home that will still benefit the community or different organizations.
Yeah, that was kind of the point I was going to speak to as well, in the sense that the people civic engagement, beyond even just community engagement, emailing representatives, making phone calls from your home. If you wanted to phone bank for a campaign or for a cause, you can do that out of your home. Maybe it's not being at the event, walking for a cause, or helping at a United Way event, but it's giving people rides, friends to help get them there so that they can do that. That's still being involved and still lifting others up within the community and being engaged.
I'm maybe interpreting a little bit of the heart of what that quote is, and something that I try to follow when I'm doing community work is, you don't want to create community work where you're necessarily the centerpiece and that you did it, but it's we did it as a group, and so in that sense you may not be known, but if you're really truly doing community work, to go by the letter of that quote and nobody knows, you're not doing community work. If nobody knows. At some point you're going to be involved in a group of people outside of just yourself, where you will be known. Now what the scale of that is depends on what you're doing, but you will be involved in that at the same time, staying true to the heart of let's do this together, and it's not just one person doing what we did as a group.
I think you can still do community engagement and not in public, but for me, I think it's good to do in public because it will help a lot of youth. It will be a good example for a lot of youth people, and it's fine if you want to do a volunteering with the community and not people to know. It's still fine, but to me, sounds like you will be a secret superstar.
Okay, thank you so much. I think this is probably a good place to stop. But let's give a round of applause to our panelists. Thank you to each of you for your time and for saying yes to my invitation. I really appreciate it, and I'm sure our students do too. Yeah, and so who has those attendance sheets? Okay, awesome. If you can sort of bring them over to the side here. Anybody who didn't get to sign in, you can go and add your name. Thank you all for spending the time to come to our community engagement panel. Our last one is November 8th at 12 o'clock. That's a Friday. So put it on your calendar. Tell your friends. Everyone is invited. Thank you.